During his appearance on Busted Open Radio, AEW President Tony Khan hit back at former WCW President Eric Bischoff for him being critical of the product. There are a lot of really interesting stories happening in AEW. There's this fascinating thing that is happening. I've noticed that things are changing a lot in the perception of how a wrestling card is built over the years. Now there is this perception. I think because this is the way people have seen it done for the most of the last 20 years, I understand it's become to some extent an industry standard, if only for the lack of competition. There is this perception that every match on every show should have a long storyline built as to why it takes place. It doesn't need to be the case for every single match. There is absolutely a lot of story in most of the matches on this show and most matches on a lot of our shows, but sometimes you can see something that is the start of a new issue. Frankly, I think the person who has been incendiary, contradictory, and hypocritical on this entire point is Eric Bischoff. If you watch Nitro, especially the good Nitros from 95 to 98, a lot of the quality of the show was lucha matches and things you didn't expect, and there was a certain exquisite randomness to the card. You turn the show on and it'd be like, hey, Rick Martel versus Perry Saturn, that's cool. Randy Savage versus Bobby Eaton, okay. And various lucha matches that didn't necessarily have build up, but they were fun matches. They weren't the big story matches. Sure, there were a lot of stories happening in WCW, but probably less than half the matches on Nitro had a story, and that was fine. It was the industry standard show. Then it tried to copy the competition and put lots of story where every single match had a story and had two guys having a fight over a cup of coffee and catering, and that just doesn't need to be the case. Sometimes it can be as simple as a challenge and two people fighting to be the best, but the majority of the time, or a large percentage of the time, you should have a story built into a match. But the perception that you can't just have two people come in and fight, it could be the start of something, it could lead to something with different people, who knows? There are a lot of different ways to skin a cat. In this case, to see the person who probably put more cold matches on TV and did it successfully and well say it's an abomination to do it, it's pretty contradictory. Found it very ironic for Eric Bischoff to say, why is this match happening? Why did 60% of the matches on Nitro happen? Honestly, that's when Nitro was a better show before they tried to change it to something else. While Seth Rollins is claimed to be on the level of Roman Reigns, Ric Flair took to his podcast to disagree as he said, look at Seth Rollins. He's been 10 different things. You know what he was the best at? Being the architect, because he's really strong and technical in the ring. But since then, I can't even keep track of all of it. I know why it is. It's all to sell merchandise. I saw where he compared himself to Roman Reigns. I don't think that's even close. Going into detail on his long-standing friendship with Triple H, Shawn Michaels said this about him on Impulsive. I know everybody can only see him now as the head cheese, but he wasn't then. I was the top dude at that time, and he was the guy still waiting for his first break, and he was a friend of mine. He was the best friend of the most hated guy in the company and in the business, and he never left my side. He could have thrown me under the bus at any point, saved himself, you know what I mean? For me, that's the kind of stuff I can cry about, but how can I not give every ounce of myself for whatever he needs me to do? When it comes to possibly facing Roman Reigns down the line for the world title, Sami Zayn said in an interview with Mirror Sport, I see all the fans trying to predict it and they don't know, and in a way, I don't know because the reactions start taking it in different directions. For example, the dynamic between Jay and myself, I don't know that it was ever meant to be like this, but now you're starting to get people guessing what's Jay going to do and where it is going for him. Speaking about his talks with AEW prior to his WWE return, Karrion Kross told The Mirror, there was an idea that was proposed to me to come and do something there at AEW, but it was just so abundantly clear to me from dealing with fans face to face that a WWE return was what people wanted to see. With the winner of the Money in the Bank contract having a year to cash in for a world title shot, WrestleVote said this about Austin Theory's prospects of a cash-in to Give Me Sport. There is an idea that he is the first guy to wait a full year, like the day of, or let's say the night of Money in the Bank next year. That's the storyline. Like, you have to cash this in 2.5 hours. You have to cash this in 90 minutes. That type of thing. I know that idea is on the table. Giving an update on the big guy possibly returning to WWE, Steve Carrier of Ringside News reported that we've asked about some names floating around for a return. We have confirmed that Ryback is not one of them. There is little upside to bringing him back, and he is a terrible human being. Speaking of former WWE stars that will more than likely not be returning to the company, Ringside News would also note that WWE could bring back even more ex-stars, but we can nix one more name off the list. We were told that it's hard to picture Alberto Del Rio ever receiving welcome back to the company. Speaking to Inside the Ropes, Bryan Danielson touched on nearly signing with Ring of Honor after finishing out one of his WWE deals. It was really interesting. My contract with WWE was up in 2018 and I was considering going to Ring of Honor, and I was talking to the Young Bucks and I was talking to Cody Rhodes just to kind of see. All their contracts were up with Ring of Honor and I was like, what are you guys going to do? Because even my lawyer, who doesn't know anything about pro wrestling, he said, hey, I don't think you'd want to sign with Ring of Honor if these Young Bucks aren't going, because they've got this YouTube show. I don't know if you've heard of it, called Being the Elite, and it's essentially the driver for the popularity of Ring of Honor at the time, right? And so those guys go away. We don't know if Ring of Honor will nearly still be as popular, and then with Cody's contract coming up, if they leave and Cody leaves, what will Ring of Honor's popularity be like? So that was part of the discussion. Talking about stepping back as a full-time commentator in AEW, Jim Ross said on his Grilling JR podcast, "We're trying real hard to try and make that 1 hour show, improve to make it better. I like working with Excalibur and Shivani. I think that's our best group, at least for me because I'm working. I miss being on Dynamite, but I'm glad Tony put me on Rampage because I want to help build that brand. That was the concept. Put JR on Friday nights, maybe viewers will tune in out of old time's sake or whatever the reason may be. It's an hour show. That's how I started my career. Looks like that's how I'm going to end it, doing 1 hour shows. If that's the case, that's fine with me." Ross would also reveal that he is cancer free. "I had a good week regarding my cancer issues. I'm going to start next week with some treatment. I can't remember what the thing is called. I want to say hyperbaric chamber or something along those lines. I'm going on Tuesday for my first test run and see how that's going to work. They think it will speed up the healing, and if it does, then I win. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a few wins in this project, so at least we're making some progress there. I still think it's going to be about a year of healing this wound. I'm just tired of dressing it, undressing it, medicating, and all this In any event, life is good. I'm alive. I have no cancer, and I'm just healing these burns, and that's what they are. It looks like I got caught on fire or something, so it's looking a lot better than it did. So anyway, I'm blessed. I'm better than I was." On the Masked Man show, MLW owner Court Bauer touched on AEW president Tony Khan and his handling of the backstage issues in the company, as he said, "You have leadership that if you do X, Y is going to happen. Sometimes it's a little grayer. So I think this is one of those moments where the locker room's going to learn. What are the consequences if we do this? Are there consequences? And now the onus is on Tony Khan to determine how he wants to dictate his leadership role. How does he want the boys and girls to look at him?" With a video package airing on Dynamite showing the Elite, the trio were reportedly backstage during the show as well. Speaking about possible plans for their comeback, Brian Alvarez said on Wrestling Observer Radio, "I'm pretty sure they are going to be wrestling for the trio's title when they come back." Talking about a conversation with his doctor regarding his health issues from pro wrestling, Mick Foley said on his podcast, he said, "We've been looking over your MRIs and your x-rays. You've got too many issues. You got muscular, neurological, skeletal, and even if we were able to help from a neurological standpoint, there's nothing we can do with those other things. I'm looking at all these things I did during the course of my career, and I mean, I'm paying a steeper price than I thought imaginable. I thought, oh yeah, of course my hips are going to be sore, my knees are going to be hurting, I'm going to be arthritic, but now I'm curved around like this, you know? I know saying tough times are relative. There are other people who say I would trade lives with you. I'm getting up at 6 a.m. I'm working 2 jobs to make ends meet. Nonetheless, this was pretty devastating for me, and so I was going back to WWE in a really tough, dark place. It was a tough time for me. The concussions, seeing the fallout, seeing how much I lost in height. The doctor said, we got your MRIs back. This is before they even decided not to do the surgery. I said, how is it? He goes, it's a bad MRI. And I went, how bad? And he proceeded to talk like 5 different discs. All things that I kind of knew, but it still stings when you actually see the proof. Now I find out it's not just the discs, it's the spine itself. Foley would also reveal that he approached AEW President Tony Khan about an idea for Thunder Rosa. I just reached out and said, hey, have you ever thought of procuring the rights of Thunderstruck for Thunder Rosa? This was about a year ago, just out of the blue, you know, not like, hey, can I have a job? I just thought, man, that would be epic to get the whole crowd chanting. He thanked me for it, wished me well, and away I went. Good guy. I met Tony years and years ago. Great guy. With it said that Chelsea Green could be making a return to WWE under the new regime, Steve Carey of Ringside News would note that a report broke yesterday that WWE is interested in bringing back Chelsea Green. A tenured source said they have heard about 100 names being discussed. Chelsea Green is just one of them. Her name has not been mentioned by Triple H. Touching on a real-life beef with Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch told the MMA Hour, here's how I look at it. You have 2 women at the top of their game and both of them want to be the best. So who's the best? Competition breeds competition. And I think we just got older, and not necessarily that success doesn't get to your head and that's why you lose a friendship. It's just we both want to be on top and there's only room for one. Talking about the possibility of CM Punk returning to AEW, the Wrestling Observer newsletter mentioned that in Norfolk on October 26th, it was noted that several of the top people were saying that Punk would not be back. A few names were mentioned, with Chris Jericho being the name mentioned most, but the many, if not most, of the key top names were saying they wouldn't work with him. One top star noted, Punk won't be back. His value on screen isn't 1% worth the hassle and black cloud he causes backstage. Another top star noted the team has decided he's out, and regardless of some being willing to work with him, the collective decided that he was voted off the island. With it rumored that Chris Jericho spoke to CM Punk following the backstage incident after All Out, allegedly calling him a cancer in the locker room, Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful would write in regards to this, that story did not come from Chris Jericho. He did not respond for comment when I asked about it. Speaking about previous plans for MJF and CM Punk prior to Punk's involvement in the backstage brawl with the Elite falling All Out, it was said by the Wrestling Observer that Bryan Danielson and CM Punk were back, and then Kenny Omega came back, and things did not jump back immediately, but for Punk and Omega, they barely got their feet wet. The hope was to revive Punk versus MJF and have the classic promo battles, plus all the great undercard action. I don't think things would have been back to September 2021 no matter what, but they also didn't have to be at that level to thrive as a company going forward. Taking to his Hall of Fame podcast, Booker T called out fans of AEW for their treatment of pro wrestlers, as he said, the AEW fans, man, they don't care about those guys in the ring. They do not care about those guys working. Those guys they're nothing more than toys, video games for these guys. They don't care about those guys in the ring. If they're not out there getting a "this is awesome" chant, they don't give a damn about these guys going out there getting hurt. They really don't. On his drive-through podcast, Jim Cornette, when reviewing the AEW roster, realized Sting was contracted as he took this time to call out the company. Oh, I forgot Sting's still there. Yes, you keep Sting. You try to figure out what has motivated Sting to dive off the balcony at 62 years of age for these cretins. But yeah, you know, Sting is of name, he's a legend, he's an icon, and you play to that strength instead of trying to make him one of the boys and just show up when it snows in Florida. 2 pay-per-views a year, he would make you his salary back and more in some feature match. Not the main event, but a feature match. And then you make people hungry for it again because it doesn't happen for another 6 months. Speaking about no longer having Cody Rhodes and AEW TNT champion Wardlow told Eat, Sleep, Podcast, Repeat, I don't know if I would say let down because I love Cody, and I will support whatever he wants to do with his life, so I would never hold that against him, and I told him that. I personally do miss his presence in the locker room. He does have a very positive backstage presence, and he was somebody I could comfortably go to and speak to, so I do miss having him around, but I will always wish him the best of luck in whatever he does. With it claimed from the CM Punk camp that his dog Larry was hit by a door and had to have his teeth removed because of it from the all-out backstage brawl, Dave Meltzer of F4W Online got quotes from those with AEW who are close to the elite that said, a completely made-up story. Punk's losing in the investigation results and is desperate. There was a multiple weeks-long investigation and this was oddly not discovered. Also, it so happened to be mentioned the moment there was news about the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega possibly coming back. It's insane that people would even humor this. One person who was allegedly in the room seconds after the incident started and isn't affiliated with either side said the following to Meltzer: the dog story is a complete lie. When the altercation was happening, Punk was a total psycho. Kenny picked the dog up to save him from being hurt and gave him to Mega. Mega was holding the dog, screaming at Punk to stop. Punk didn't even register that his baby was being held by a stranger in the middle of a fight. It didn't stop him one bit. They never spoke to Lucy Guy, the only person in the room who didn't work regularly for AEW other than the security, because she was a non-factor. Sat in the corner the whole time as her husband was throwing chairs, punches, and biting Kenny Omega. Given her walkout from WWE over the summer, many are wondering if Sasha Banks will return to the company, as the Wrestling Observer noted that she is still under contract to WWE, but there is no word on when she'll return, as there was said to be hang-ups in negotiations for a new deal. Amidst all these reports, Banks would take to Twitter to write, "I hope the rumors are true." Talking about Bray Wyatt, Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful would give an update on storyline plans for the star, noting that we're told that several pieces of Bray Wyatt's past were to be included in some of his segments, at least as of the creative on Thursday. Specifically, we've heard that the rocking chair that he used during his initial WWE run was to be brought in. In addition, the Fiend mask is set to be used, but plans called for it to be ripped up by someone, either Bray or another talent. It seems there are talks of a major opponent for the recently returned Wyatt, with the Wrestling Observer pointing out, with the success of the Wyatt angle, expect there to be more of it. Wyatt has become the top merch seller over the bloodline. While it would be best to keep them apart for a while, the idea is Reigns versus Wyatt could be the biggest program in a long time, since Wyatt is so hot right now. With AEW President Tony Khan recently calling Eric Bischoff a hypocrite for his comments on AEW putting on cold matches, the former WCW president took to his 83 Weeks podcast to respond and take a shot at the promotion, saying, "No, I didn't see it or hear it. I'm aware of it, obviously, because people kept blowing me up yesterday, wanting me to react, or the day before. I think it happened on Thursday. I'm not sure. It probably happened Wednesday. I'm aware of it, and look, hey, I've criticized myself plenty on this show for things that I wish I would have done differently, or things that I've learned subsequent to my time in WCW that I wished I had the knowledge or the instinct or insight that I have now 25 years ago. It would have been a better show, but there were certainly random matches that didn't have any story in WCW. I'm not denying that, but I'm also going to point out that I don't think I ever said in any of my commentary about AEW that I believe that every match should have a story. When you're introducing new talent, or when you've got talent that you haven't really matched up storyline wise with an opponent yet, but you want to expose that talent, you want the audience to become familiar with that talent. You want to establish that talent. Sure, put them in there in a match, or put people in matches that don't really have a story, but use that time in non-storyline matches to give us some real backstory and information about said talent. Make us care. It doesn't always have to be be in the form of a storyline, a traditional structured Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 kind of story. If I've ever given the impression that I thought every match on Nitro had a storyline, forgive me now. I never meant to. My issue in my comments about AEW and the creative behind it is really about your top matches that don't have sufficient story or structure, or at least a compelling one. There's always an excuse for a match. There's always an angle, your traditional, from back in the beginning of time, an inciting moment that creates a match or creates a storyline, but your top matches, your A, B, C, and D storylines, that's different. I've seen a lot of matches, a lot of storylines, what AEW considers a storyline, that are feel are just nothing more than excuses for a match. They're not well-crafted stories. That's my criticism. It's not a shot. I'm not making fun of anybody. I'm not trying to belittle anybody. I'm pointing out that I believe in today's competitive environment, with television being what it is, that if you want to, pay attention, Tony, build and grow your audience. You're going to have to do it with well-crafted, compelling, well-structured storylines, and I don't see it. I see excuses for matches, and that's not a storyline. So that's my critique. Constructive as I hope it is interpreted, but clearly won't be. As it looks as though CM Punk will have his contract bought out by AEW following his involvement in the backstage brawl after All Out with the EVPs, Jim Cornette took a shot at the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega for never wanting Punk in the company. They didn't want Punk there from the start. I'm talking about the Harley Boys and old Twinkle Toes, because he exposed them. These guys he exposed for their limited audience. Tony Khan thought that he could put together a national wrestling promotion on their backs. When he found out those backs weren't wide enough to carry it, he had to start bringing in stars. They got somebody who was doing numbers, and they were jealous of it because not only was Punk doing bigger numbers than they were, but he was doing it with wrestling instead of their brand of convoluted Western swing dancing. So those three guys, they needed Punk out of there because he was exposing the whole myth of the Elite as this massive, powerful force around wrestling. Speaking of the brawl, former producer for AEW and friend of CM Punk, Ace Steel, was involved and would end up getting let go due to this, as he has now broken his silence, posting this quote on social media: "The moment you put a stop to people taking advantage of you and disrespecting you is when they define you as difficult, selfish, or crazy. Manipulators hate boundaries." Revealing WWE's plans for Kevin Owens, WrestleVotes noted in an interview with Give Me Sport that he was pegged to get involved with Sammy and the Bloodline, but that's white hot right now. Those plans, from what I've been told, are definitely pushed back. But they're not off, because the plan is for Kevin Owens to be with Sami Zayn. Whatever they had planned for Kevin Owens is totally on pause, because this stuff with Sami doesn't come around often. This was supposed to be a little 3-4 week comedy deal, and it's getting big. When reviewing the AEW roster, Jim Cornette had this to say about Malachi Black's run thus far in the promotion. "This guy has been a disappointment since the start. Remember, he looked good. We thought, okay, guy looks like a badass. Had some buzz about him, came in, did the thing with Cody, and then all of a sudden, Supernatural City came in, and every match of his, he would have a good match that would go in the toilet because he was playing some kind of spooky mind games with people. Then he gets a group around him, and they cater to him until he realizes he ain't getting over, and then he wants to go back to where he kinda got over a little better." Taking to Instagram, Carmella had some bad news, as she said. "I've gone back and forth with myself about posting this because I'm not looking for any sort of sympathy, but since today is the last day of Infant Loss Awareness Month, I wanted to share my story. Today, I was treated for an ectopic pregnancy. I never thought something like this would happen to me, especially after suffering from an early miscarriage in September. Nothing can prepare you for this news after getting a positive pregnancy test. I was cautiously optimistic this time around after the early loss I had already experienced, but was hoping for the best. I spent 12 hours in the ER on Saturday when I started experiencing some sharp pains on my left side. After several tests and ultrasounds, I was given the devastating news that this was in fact an abnormal pregnancy. The reason I'm sharing all of this is because in the moment it feels so isolating. Why doesn't anyone ever talk about this? My husband and I watched a new comedy special last week, and she spoke openly about her miscarriage. I immediately burst into tears. She went on to explain that we should be speaking more openly about this topic so we as women don't blame ourselves and think there's something wrong with us. I want to do the same. I'm part of this statistic, and it's happening to me. Again, I'm not looking for for sympathy. I know I'll eventually recover from all of this mentally, physically, and emotionally. For anyone dealing with any type of pregnancy loss, I want you to know your feelings and emotions are valid. There is nothing wrong with you, and you are not alone. And this was your pro wrestling news update. I hope you're all having a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.